This episode contains discussions about suicide, which some listeners may find distressing. Our intention is to handle these topics with sensitivity, offering insight and support. However, if you or someone you know is struggling with thoughts of self-harm or suicide, please reach out to a mental health professional or contact a crisis support hotline in your area. Listener discretion is advised. And if this episode is too much for you, we'll see you on the next one. Welcome to Uncharted Your Sidekick for Life, the podcast where we navigate the unpredictable journeys of life with real stories, insights, and inspiration. I'm Natalie Peyton, joined by my co-hosts, Dan Dillard and Dr. Leon Vanstone. Each episode, we explore stories of personal growth, discovery, and mentorship. Whether you're Gen Z, a parent, or just someone looking to break the mold, you're in the right place. Today's episode is fascinating as we're joined by an incredible guest, Jennifer Hill. Jennifer is a successful entrepreneur, speaker, and coach who's on a mission to help people build deeper connections and elevate consciousness. She's here to share her incredible journey and offer valuable lessons on everything from business to self-compassion. Special thanks to our Gen Z contributors, Anais, who asks, what's the balance between living in the present and looking into the future? And what do you do when you're stuck in a job you don't like? Stay tuned. You don't want to miss this one.
Alrighty. Ready, guys?
Ready.
Fix it in
y'all
post
ready?
if we get the number
Let's
wrong.
do it. Conscious loving breath, as my friend Arthur says.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just finished a year-long mastermind we did. He trained Tony Robbins how to speak and Pierce Brosnan, and he's been instrumental. When I first started working with him 12 years ago, I used to speak like this, and I would talk very quickly, and I'd say, I can't help it. And now it's more like, let's just, be peaceful so we don't give people a heart attack while they listen to us.
That's right. Well, let's get started. Welcome to Uncharted Your Sidekick for Life.
Woo! It's my excited voice.
I think you need to amp that up about 2 to 3 points. You can do better.
I didn't want to scare the listeners. We just had the calmness discussion.
You're like, woo.
It was a centered,
Woo.
loving woo.
Oh,
Centered,
I
loving
love it.
That's
That
great.
is my new favorite phrase.
I believe we're in episode 8. We're having a debate, but
Yeah, I think
let's go with
A
8.
debate on 8.
There we go.
It sounds like a good political discussion. A debate on 8 tonight at 6.
Yeah.
And happy to have a new guest, mentor guest on. But before we get there, let's do some quick intros for the rest of us. Let's start with you, Natalie.
Hello, everybody. I'm Natalie Peyton. I'm an actor, comedian, and podcast person, Natalie.
And we have someone...
fixing my mic. It's not rocket science. Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Leon Vanstone, rocket scientist, storyteller, and entrepreneur, among many other things, and one of your hosts today on Uncharted.
Thank you. And I'm Dan Dillard, host of Uncharted, co-founder of Founding Up, and among other things. This white hair just says that there's just a lot of experience there. I don't know if it's good or bad, but you learn from it as long as you learn from it. And today we have every one of our guests is special. This guest is extra special. We met a week ago,
almost exactly.
a week ago at a retreat that was wonderful retreat. There's so many great people there, so many great connections. And I meant to ask you the very last day of our retreat when you'd be in Austin, because you're not an Austinite, so we'll get into that. And then turns out afterwards you're like, I'm going to be on Thursday. I'm like, let's get you on the podcast. So
I would like to
Great timing.
point out I don't agree with retreats because I only go forwards. Sorry, I had to.
That was a dad joke.
While you were
Ba-dum-bum.
talking about it, I was thinking about it, and I'm like, I have to.
we just started talking about dad jokes.
Yep.
And that was a great one.
You're
That
welcome.
was a great one.
You're welcome.
But
Hopefully my son
Not
hears
very
it,
British
like,
of you, though.
in 10 years or
And-
something.
so our guest, Jennifer Hill. Let's start off with tell us a little bit about what you're doing now, and then we'll go backwards.
Sounds good. We'll be retreating, Leon. Breathe. It's okay. You will survive it. So it's a pleasure to be with each of you. I am Jennifer Cahill. I built and exited my first company in 2018. I'm also a bit of a recovering jerk. Nice to meet you all. So part of my life revolves around traveling around the world, coaching clients, and teaching people how not to be a dick in business. So I had to learn that the hard way. And so I now often do talks called Cracking the Code of Human Connection, lessons I've learned from autism. I got diagnosed as being on the spectrum. It was the trifecta year for me. In 2018, sold my first company, went through a divorce, and got diagnosed as being on the spectrum. Thank you for that little gift, universe.
It's a growth year.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I think that's what we call it, a growth year, and then followed by COVID. So that was lots of fun and development. And I don't know about you guys, but I swore I would never build another company. After I sold the last one, it's like, I haven't given birth to a child, but I would imagine it's very similar. Never will I ever build another company again. And fast forward at the end
Famous
of
last word.
Exactly. Have you guys ever noticed that when you say, never will I ever, you always do it, right?
I learned that lesson years ago. Some of these grades are because of that. I would say, I'd never do that. And then next thing you know, like,
Oh man, that wasn't so bad. Maybe I should do that again.
There's a reason for that. Or I'll never use that product or whatever. Next thing you know, I'm like, there's a fit for that. So yeah.
The brain does not understand never. I'm a big fan of neuroscience consciousness. So then fast forward, after I sold that company, all of a sudden my life did a 180. I remember exactly where I was. So it was 2019. I had met a woman. I was living in New York, and there was an A-list actor who lived in our building, and we're out to dinner one night, and he's telling us we're talking about building schools and life, and he's talking about divining his next role. So I had this contract to run the company for XYZ amount of years after. And he tells me about his dream coach. And this dream coach helps you divine your next role. And that's what a lot of the big A-list actors do. And I was like, well, shoot, can she help a normal corporate like me figure out what I'm going to do with my life after my tenure with this company is over? And he's like, sure. So he introduces me. And it's so quintessentially LA. I meet her in LA in Beverly Hills the next week at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Baby, darling, mwah, mwah, mwah. Okay, here's how it's going to be, like poolside. Ex-supermodel turned dream coach. And she's fabulous. I love her. We're still friends. And she says, oh, my dear, here's what we're going to do, baby. You're going to write yourself a note tonight. It's going to say, show me through my symbols and higher meaning and messages what my purpose is. And I'm like, okay. So you light the candle, you turn off the lights, you breathe deeply. You write this note to your higher consciousness, and the weirdest thing happened. Middle of the night, so you record your dreams in the middle of the night or you write them down. And I saw a male newscaster. Now, when I was in my 20s, I'd done a lot of TV. My first wedding was on TV, did a bunch of stuff with MTV, and had a great publicist, but I hadn't done TV in 10 years. So I wake up, I relay the dream to Goalie, and she says, oh, my love, you're going to be on TV. I was like, no, what the hell? I can't even be on TV, even if I wanted to. I have a 5-year contract with the company I just sold. Through a series of serendipities, in late 2019, November 1st of 2019, I was the luckiest entrepreneur you've ever met. I was able to leave the company. Our team still runs it. It's still successful. They're running it even better than I did. And I got transitioned into a consulting role. All I had to do was consult 10 hours a week during COVID. And I was offered a TV hosting gig and offered an opportunity to do a panel with Deepak Chopra and moderate it and Don Hoffman. And next thing you know, it took balls of steel. How I still did this, I don't know. On December 31st, a week and a half before the panel with Deepak and Don, I called UCI, who was putting on the event. I said, hey guys, tell Deepak and Don I saved him a spot on my new TV show. And it was loose. I'm using air quotes for that, for those of you not watching this, because it was a very loose term. And they said, Deepak will meet you in studio. He wants us our car. And that began the part of a 17-part series that we did on conversations at the intersection of cutting-edge science and spirituality. And at that same time, I was offered the opportunity to co-found a new tech company, which is what we do now, called OptiMatch, Om.app. And we created an algorithm that synthesizes my ability to match people. So you know how we all have our superpowers and gifts? I've surrendered to mine, and mine is to connect people. I can't even help it. If you put me in a room with anybody and you start telling me what you're passionate about, anywhere from 3 to 20 names will come to me, and I try to drip them now to people so I don't overwhelm them.
Bombard them.
Yeah, I have done that. I have given people 10 referrals on one call. But I love it. So now I get to spend the rest of my life connecting people, helping elevate my own consciousness. And my dream is to help 1 billion people to connect deeply to themselves and others. So
Wonderful. Love
That's
that.
amazing.
Really
I'm
cool.
here for
Only-
this. I'm on the
only
edge
a
of my
billion?
seat.
Only a
like, why
billion.
why that
come
number?
on.
A billion is just a number that's out with me. I'll see if I feel like pushing myself.
This
Maybe
is a coachable moment. At least 10.
Okay. Well, 10. We're not at 10
We're not
billion
even
yet.
at-
So, but yeah, we
well,
could be.
if you connect them for many generations to come,
I like where your head's at. That's why you're
if we build legacy,
That's like rocket science right there. I understand now why you're the rocket scientist in the group.
just got to wait long enough, and we'll get 100 billion.
I love it. 100 billion. Now I can see I was playing small. Thank you for the positive resistance.
One of those things.
Just need 300 years of you connecting people on this planet.
Well, longevity, Deepak, telomeres, lengthening your telomeres, immortality. What's his name? Who's that famous guy who everybody's obsessed with who's reverse aging? Brian Johnson.
Oh,
I'll just get on Brian Johnson's regimen, become a vampire, and reverse age myself.
It's a plan. Let's go.
Love
All right,
that.
let's do it.
Love that.
On board.
All right,
Love
come
that.
on.
Let's
We
go.
got this.
So, as you know, the format of our show and the purpose of our show is mentorship. It is, your Sidekick for Life is designed for Gen Z and their parents, right? And mostly because the experiences that Leon and I both had, and we'll get into some of that a little later, led us down this path where mentorship is just this incredible thing that opens up the world for individuals. I feel like and we've talked about this in the show, for as soon as you go into school, there's this kind of like this path that everyone goes to, go to school, go to college, do this to get the job. There's this narrative that's been sold, right? But at some point, our experiences led us to see that at some point you step out of that beaten path, and typically there's a mentor involved that says, do this, do that, do this, right?
Stop being a jerk.
Exactly. And
That was my mentor told me.
Wow.
And so purpose of the show is just to showcase how mentorship is affected, and also some of the challenges that Gen Z is facing now. So to let everyone know that we're listening, we're hearing, we're out there talking to Gen Z and trying to understand from their mouth what is affecting them, and then how the generations that have moved before them have tackled some of these things, and how we would approach that. So,
Can I just randomly drop in and tell you, in the same way I have resources for people, one of my favorite things that I wish I could gift to every Gen Zer out there right now, may I share it with you really quick? So I had this really cool moment about a year ago. I don't drive. I haven't driven for 5 years now. Turns out I'm not the best driver. So I decided to outsource that. Little secret, by the way, Gen Zers, all of us out there, outsource the things you're not good at.
Right.
So this guy picks me up at like 10:30 p.m. at night on a Friday in Beverly Hills to drive me. He's an Uber driver to Santa Monica. And he's like, ma'am, you get to the point where you're ma'am, my life is over. I'm going to be 21 next week. And I'm like, oh, kiddo, your life is just beginning. I was like, let's start. And I love to geek out with people on things like numerology and gene keys and human design. So a few minutes into the car ride, first I pull up his numerology, and it turns out he's the same life path as me. We have fun with that. Great little website for that is tokenrock.com. Fast forward, I get into his gene keys. If you know your birth time, all this is free. It's all free out there. Go to genekeys.com, get your free profile on there. I read him his profile. He calls his mom at 10:30 at night to get his birth time. By the time we get out of the car, he's like, oh my God, ma'am, you're right. I do have a future and I do have a purpose.
Aww.
And what I love, it's such a great little life hack. I don't know about you guys. When I was 16, 17, 21, I didn't know my head from my butt or what I wanted to do with life. I literally was applying to be a post office person when I was graduating college because I didn't know where to go or what to do or how to be a human or an adult for that matter. And it was just so sweet. So what I love about Gene Keys is a fun little life hack. It tells you your purpose. It tells you what struggles you're going to have in romance. It tells you, I like Leah's.
I know.
While you're telling this story, I'm going to look this up. And
totally. Go to
genekeys.
genekeys.com.
Why not? While we're at it.
Yeah, exactly. Go to genekeys.com, free profile, totally free on there. Great guy named Richard Red came up with it. It tells you your purpose, your biggest obstacle, what's linked to your prosperity. In my case, my purpose is to manifest the gift of adventure. To do it, I need to transform the shadow of hunger. So if you know me, I eat voraciously and I also devour life and experiences. Right. So it's always like tempering that. And then, for example, your prosperity, in my case, it's related to my integrity and I have to transform the shadow of judgment. But then as you get deeper into it, this is all free. It'll give you 20 minutes of free audio on there. And then as you dive deeper into it, it'll even tell you what keeps you healthy And I do it for myself every month. I reread it. I do it for friends, Uber drivers, clients I work with. It's just a lot of fun.
I'm going to be present right now, but do it after the podcast because I'll get sucked in. Oh yeah,
he's like he heard you. He is like, yeah, I'm listening, but I'm a rocket scientist. I can do two things at once.
I'm a woman. I can do two things.
Every Gen Zer though I've ever shared this with, they're like, their chin drops and they're like, oh my God, you've literally helped change my life. Because isn't that the purpose? Isn't that why we're here? To figure out what our purpose. What is our purpose? Poof, you get a purpose and you get a purpose. Everybody look under your chairs, you get a purpose.
Right.
What did it say?
What was it? What was it?
No. So, the magic doesn't happen in this studio on its own. We obviously have an editor, Nolan, who just messaged me on WhatsApp, phones down.
Thank you, Nolan.
Thanks, Nolan. All right, well, we'll save that for later. Maybe we'll do it in post.
Phones down.
I got to do as I'm told, ladies and gentlemen.
That sounds boring.
The performer knows.
The engineer has spoken.
That's hilarious.
Editor, producer, the Nolan.
So you already kind of gave a sneak peek at what you thought, but I like to always go back to 15, 16, and what your life looked then. Like, what were you seeking? What did you think you were going to become? What did that path look like? How did it transform for you?
I originally, when I was 5 years old, my grandfather was in the Marine Corps and got like a Purple Heart for having been shot down and surviving the most times during war. So love to you, Grandpa. And one time I remember he would host these fabulous 4th of July parties. And there was a general who comes up to me and he goes to like pinch my cheeks and goes, "Oh, sweetheart, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I don't know where my brain came up with this. I was like, first woman president of the United States. I think I only wanted it because to the billion people point, I wanted to do the impossible at 5 years old, that I even knew that there was a president of the United States and that I wanted to be that. And so when I was younger, I was very, very driven. But as I got into my teenage years, not knowing I was on the spectrum and really struggling to fit in. I didn't know myself at all. I hated myself. At 15 years old, our cheerleading coach taught us to be bulimic. Oh, girls, if you ever drink too much or eat too much, just stick your fingers down your throat.
Oh, wow.
Thank you for that
horrific.
Yeah. Thank you for that little gift 10 years of bulimia later. But I truly believe I don't regret anything. I truly believe it all helped me to go on the journey and the path. And I kind of went through a phrase that I call the dark night of the soul. Some of you may have heard of that. So I went from being this straight A student, doing everything right, and no matter what I did, I just didn't feel like I belonged. I didn't know myself. I certainly didn't love myself. And then the bulimia started, then alcoholism, drug use, and I left high school at 16 and went straight to college. And I just couldn't figure myself or the world out. So I actually, unfortunately, tried to take my own life a couple of times during that period. Because I remember being at a party with friends and, we had all the coolest friends and my girlfriend was this popular girl who everybody loved. And I just remember sitting on a sand dune in the desert long before Burning Man or any of that existed. And I must have been about 17 years old and just crying by myself and being like, nobody's ever going to understand me and I don't understand me. So maybe it's better if I'm just not here. So now I just feel so grateful that I do whatever I can to help people with depression, anxiety, neurodiverse, neurotypical. It's whatever we are, whatever I can do. If I can help one other human being to make it as long as I have, that's my purpose.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. That was really strong. I mean, it's one of those things that life teaches us so many lessons. You were talking about 2019. Where you had 3 things that came at you at once, and life just has this way of just showing up for us, and the beautiful thing is we have choices, right? And you making the right choice is a gift to us today, right? You making those choices that were like along the way. You're here today, and you're impacting so many people. So that's wonderful. So
thank you, Dan. Yeah, I just wish. If anybody out there, you guys, if you're struggling, if you're having a hard day, if you feel like you're not enough. I was sitting next to a guy on a plane the other day, and he's like a prolific attorney, famous guy, really big. And he's like, Jen, I still sometimes feel like I'm not good enough. And we all have it. And I think whatever we can do, look at ourselves in the mirror, as my friend Arthur taught me, and say, I love you. I believe in you. Do whatever it takes. Uproot those limiting beliefs. Surround yourself with people who are kind and compassionate. And that year I went through the divorce, one of my dear friends gave me the best piece of advice I've ever gotten. She said, Jen, You deserve to find someone who will cherish you. But first, you must learn to cherish yourself.
Yes.
And that's, if I could teach every human being on the planet, no matter what part of the world you're in, whatever language you are, whatever race, gender, whatever your thoughts or, perspectives are, could we cherish ourselves? And I feel like that is the gift of life.
Mm-hmm.
When we fight with one another, when we fight with our colleagues, our kids, our spouses, our friends, our business partners, we're not fighting with an upset 45-year-old or 70-year-old or 30-year-old. We're fighting with an upset 4-year-old who their needs weren't met at some point. And so if we can turn that perspective inward and look at ourselves and say, wow, what do you need today?
Right.
And what if we could be compassionate so the next time somebody we're in a fight with, we see them, instead of being an upset adult, we see them as an upset, 4-year-old or 5-year-old. That allows us then to drop into compassion and to shift our perspective.
Yeah. I love that. I was having a conversation with my daughter the other day, and we, as one does, I've got a 21-year-old, right? And so part of the journey has been lived experience of what some of the challenges are. And she'll come and vent about losing a friendship or why she's not talking to someone at some point or another. And it's always there's a dad. Besides dad jokes, we're always trying to solve things, even though sometimes all they need to do is listen, and that's a lesson for me. But in this conversation, the thought that came out was a lot of times there's the reason for some of these arguments or fights or disconnects with friends is because we have an expectation on someone else, right? And my perspective, and I learned this a long time ago, is that the only person you should expect from is yourself.
I love that, Dan. High five. That's great.
Because you, just like it says, everyone, we've always heard everyone in this world is different, and that is so completely true. We have our own DNA and the DNA of how we were raised and the experiences. And so how I look at a problem is unique. How I look at life is unique. Although we assume, and we make an assumption that, well, we get along, you guys should see things the way I see things, right? And there is some generalization. You do see some things, but you'll never see something exactly the way I see it. And to have that expectation of someone else that you have of yourself will always let you down.
100%.
Because they're just not. We think about everybody's a different computer, different programming. They're not going to talk exactly the same. And so what I'm hearing you share has got some really similar lines across that, is that you've got to first understand you and just understand that you are unique, and then allow for that grace between me and you. That's what grace is for.
Oh my God, you cannot make this up, Dan. This is so strange. So I have a very deep spiritual practice, 2 hours a day, every day. And one of the things one of my teachers taught me, Michael Beckwith from Agape, is to every day ask the universe, or whatever you consider your source, what is my assignment for today and what is my purpose? And I've never, in all the years I've been doing this, over a decade now, I ask myself every day, what is my assignment? And today I was given the assignment of grace. And then you just brought that word up. That was amazing.
So
that's really cool.
So this episode is different than some of the other ones because it is getting into a lot of that, which I think needs to be heard, right? Which is how do we know each other and work on that and understand that you've got to have grace for yourself and grace for others, and that's that grace that allows so much more flexibility. So it's that connective tissue. I look at it as a connective tissue. The grace is connective tissue. It connects you and I, connects you and I, connects you and I. We're all different, and I respect that. And there's this connective tissue that's called grace. And we've had these conversations many times.
Yeah.
And so it just kind of enables you to have a different perspective on where people are coming from, their experiences.
So true.
One another advantage, right, of it's funny how things show up, old philosophical knowledge keeps coming up, right? If you don't put your expectations onto somebody else, you don't try to control that, right? One of the few things in the world you can control is at least yourself and what you do and what you put your expectations on and what your goals are, right? You can't control other people. You can't control the outcome of the world. And if you worry about that, you're going to have a really bad time because really you're just, putting your own happiness on the roll of the dice. Like, who knows if that person likes you back, or who knows if you get the job or not, right? But if But if you worry instead about, I'm going to go to this job interview, it's going to be the best interview I've ever had, like that you can control. Like, I'm going to go and put my best foot forward with this person I like, and if they like me back, that's great. And you can control that. And then hey, they didn't like you back, you didn't get the job, but you did the best you could do. That's something I try to always frame.
There's something that I find gives me a lot of grace is what I call the anti-jerk. Am I allowed to say the a-hole word or no?
You're already like 3 a few
exactly.
times, so
I like that you're asking.
Yeah,
I was trying to be PC, so I call it the anti-asshole prayer. Every day I say out loud, universe, please remove anything or anyone who is not meant to be in my life. Give me the wisdom to know it's happening for my good and draw the right people and resources towards me. And one of the things for me at least, being autistic is when I was younger in particular, and still as an adult to some extent, I would often say things that were horribly offensive to people or say the wrong thing or all of that. And the other day I had an experience where I really connected with somebody at a party. And then there was something I thought maybe I said that didn't land right. But now instead of judging myself and going, oh, I'm a bad person because I say the anti-asshole prayer every day, I literally then just drop in and go, oh, this is just being handled for me. Maybe that person wasn't in my highest and best good. And can we really be that surrendered about it and just trust that the right people will just kind of come in, and the people who are not meant to be in your life at this point, doesn't mean never, will just naturally leave for the period of time they're not meant to be there.
Makes perfect sense. Love that.
I do too.
It is. I love the word you use, surrender. You have to surrender to certain things, and you use this as well as like trying to. A lot of times we try to control too many things and that's our ego getting in the way, and it does literally get in the way because I want this outcome, and I can't see all these other outcomes. But lived experience has told me and showed me that if I surrender to the how of this thing, so much more beauty shows up that I could have ever imagined. And so that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing, surrender to that conversation, whatever happened. But, sometimes not getting the job is the best answer.
Gift, right.
Well, and it's like, the saying, when one door closes, another door opens. They've shortened it. The full saying is, when one door closes, another door opens, but you're often too preoccupied with the closed door to know.
So true. Love that, Leo.
I've been thinking a lot about practicing and living by what you preach. Like Snorri's launched this week, my children's bedtime podcast, and there's affirmations in it, of which all of the things that the first few affirmations we've discussed today already. I'm strong. I can do things. I'm enough. And whenever talking about grace, I'll be doubting myself, like I'm not doing enough. I'm not this, that, or the other. I'm just so stressed. But then I have to step back and be like, look at what you're putting out there for the children. You need to live by your words that you're giving to them and show yourself grace as well. So I love what you stand for.
Thank you.
A little bit more about your history, because the point of what I'm trying for the audience to gain from this, other than the great information we've already talked about, is just kind of how your life did certain things and how you ended from point A to now. It's not always kind of like this vision. I went to school, this is what I studied, this is what I became. But how did mentors come into your life, and how did they impact you?
So one of the first mentors who helped me realize I was a jerk, I often get asked this story, well, was there a moment like before you realized you were a jerk and afterwards? And yes, there was a very specific moment. I was 23 years old at the time. I'm bulimic, hate myself, drinking way too much at the time. And my boyfriend at the time gets gifted a personal development class. So he and his brother go and do it. And have you ever met somebody who does that? It's like, rah, rah, they get on the soapbox. You got to do this thing. One thing I've never been good at is doing what I'm told. So if somebody says, you got to do this thing, then that bristles me sometimes. It did in the past. I've gotten better about it. So at that point, my boyfriend's urging me, you got to do this class. You got to do this class. One day I decide to do the class to prove it's a crock of shit. And so I literally show up day one of the class, and it's a room of about 150 people just outside LAX. And the guy who's co-facilitating it says, okay, guys, let's do this. We're going to change our lives. And anybody have any questions? And my hand shoots up and they're like, yes, you over there in the Von bitch shirt. I literally had like a bright pink shirt written. It was like a brand at the time in the early 2000s in fuchsia, emblazoned in fuchsia that said Von bitch on it. He's like, yes, you over there in that shirt. And I was like, how would you respond to the fact that this, meaning the class, is a cult? And the guy looks at me and he gives a little side eye and a chuckle. He's like, if it is a cult, it's the best damn cult you'll ever join. Next question. So
Good for him.
fast forward, I am sitting there stewing in self-righteousness, being what I call a judgy bunny. I'm like, you have problems and you have problems. I got my shit figured out over here in bulimia alcoholic land. I'm good. I'm like, life's sorted. I hate my parents. I hate life, hate myself. And so most people get breakthroughs in this, but I was just so closed off to it. So the class culminates and everybody's celebrating this miraculous transformation people have had, and your friends can join you. And my boyfriend joins me with his friends, and they're waiting to see my miraculous transformation, which they are sorely disappointed by. And the woman who is co-facilitating the class, tall Aussie woman, future mentor, comes up to me and says, "Are you going to do the advanced class?" I looked at her. I rolled my eyes, and I said, "Sweetheart, darling, it was stifling enough having sat in this room the last 3 days. Do you really think I would put myself through this hell again?" And she looks at me, looks at my boyfriend. He says, "Don't get me started. It took her 8 months just to do this one." And it's those moments kind of like that old movie with Gwyneth Paltrow with sliding doors, before and after, where your life's about to go in two totally different paths. And I looked at my boyfriend and I said, "This is an at-will relationship. You can leave anytime you want." The woman who is co-leading it looks at me and she says, "Can I be really straight with you?" I said, "Sure, darling, you go ahead. You be really straight with me." She said, "You are a nasty thing. You are one of the most powerful women I've ever met in my life. Except you know what? You are like Godzilla with a huge tail swinging behind you, knocking down buildings wherever you go. Except guess what? Those aren't buildings. Those are people whose lives you're destroying." She looks at my boyfriend, says, "Leave her. It's what she needs," and walks away.
Oh, wow.
I was like, picked my jaw up off the floor. Now, I still didn't know if this woman was full of BS or whatever it was. So I go into my office the next day to do a temperature test, like a litmus test, right? 25 people in the office. I was already somewhat successful there. So before a team meeting, guys, little question. Have I ever been condescending or demeaning to any of you? The office went so quiet, you could hear a pin drop. And then one woman burst out laughing and says, "You are only the most condescending, demeaning bitch we've ever met in our lives. And we have no idea how you're successful." And that was the beginning of my journey. And that was all out of my mentor, Manal, who later became a dear friend of mine, the woman who called me out on that. She actually came and lived with us for a little bit in LA, and miraculous, but she was one of my first mentors. And then I realized the value of having a coach. So Julian Adler, who's the co-founder of my current company, came in as my business coach about 3 or 4 years into building the last company. And Julian helped me to further expound is even despite that moment, I still had years of growth. That's why I spend the 2 hours a day in meditation and reflection, is to quiet that amygdala and that part of me that might be more reactive. And so Jules came in shortly after I'd once sent my team an email. For those of you who might be doubting the fact that I was a jerk, I literally once sent an email to my team that said, in caps, in the subject line, "Are you all a bunch of effing morons? Why are you not working faster, harder, smarter?" Now understand, like I made Devil Wears Prada look like a pussycat.
Right.
But so then Julian came in and he helped me understand. Again, keep in mind, I still didn't know I was on the spectrum. I didn't know my brain worked differently. To what you just said, Dan, I didn't understand. So Jules came in and he taught me one of the most valuable things. I was ready to terminate somebody on my team who I was very frustrated by, and she wasn't returning calls, et cetera, et cetera. And Jewel,
Pushing her off the top? Or?
of course, yeah, just kick her off the building and just hope for the best.
You terminated.
The Terminator.
Yes, the Terminator. So she, this person I was frustrated by, Jules comes in and says, "Jen, what if the reason that she is a disappointment is because you are looking for her to be a disappointment? excuse me? No, I have a list of all the things that are going wrong. Like, how often do we do that, right? We make a list of our kids, our partners, our friends, of all the errors we feel like they've committed, right? And he said, I'm going to challenge you for 1 week. Write down one good thing she does a day. You don't even have to tell her. All I want you to do is for your own edification, just write it down and just keep it to yourself. And the first day I could barely do it because I'm so judgy bunny and couldn't get out of my own head. But then the second day became easier, third day became easier. She went on to be so successful that she's the one who took over the company for me when I sold it.
Wow.
And I will tell you guys that one of the analogies I use, are you guys familiar with neuroscience at all?
Somewhat.
So simple little technique that a lot of people don't, or a little note about this that a lot of people aren't familiar with. Every second of every day, we have 11 million bits of information hitting us per second. But do you want to know how many we pay attention to at a conscious level? 50 to 120 bits out of 11 million. Anybody else curious what's happening to the other 10,999,000 bits?
Subconscious?
That's all the subconscious. So the question is, what has us do the choosing? So an analogy I like to use is imagine that you're walking around in a pitch black, infinitely wide warehouse, and you can't see anything. You can't see your hands in front of you. And your only guide is a miner's helmet that's sitting on your head with an itty-bitty little pen light. And the only thing you're going to see in this infinite darkness is whatever direction your head points. You look up, you see what's above. You look below, you get it. So too is our life. What if we could actively participate in choosing what we look for and to look for the good in ourselves and others? And actually, a dear friend of mine in Austin, we play a game every day where it's called How Does Life Get Any Better Than This? Where every day we text each other that as a reminder to always spend our day looking for the 50 to 220 bits of how life is getting better and better.
That's really awesome. I really love that. Makes a lot of sense.
So that's a little bit about my mentors.
and they do shape you in so many ways. I have a life coach. She was actually on our first show, Becky Henderson. And one of the things that she first taught me, I think 7 years ago, at that point in my office, I had just things weren't operating smoothly. And I just would get frustrated. And so I would vent to her. I wouldn't send emails to staff, but I would vent to her.
Good job.
And I remember saying, she's like, what's going on? She's up like this. I just can't, I don't understand. It's like wrestling cats. It's like wrangling cats.
Wrestling cats?
Wrangling cats. Yeah. Wrestling cats is different. It's like wrangling cats. Like, I don't understand. And she said something very similar. It's like, and it was to the, I don't know the exact words, but to the effect was, how are you seeing them? Are you seeing them as low-level employees that aren't not competent, or are you seeing them at this next level of what you'd like them to be? And that shift in my head had me start treating them differently, and expectations as far as like, here's what the potential of this individual can be. And it was an amazing self-transformation on that. And so I totally understand where that came from, and I'm really happy to see. And that is the beauty. Up to this point, we've talked about mentorship as far as guiding you in career paths and opening up doors. But today, we're talking about becoming better people through mentorship. So that's pretty amazing. But,
everybody is a reflection of us. Even our own mentors reflect us back to ourselves. It's one of the reasons I coach people is I have 183 tools I use at any given time. And I love getting to coach and mentor others. I never thought I'd wind up being a coach. And I got asked after I exited my first company to start mentoring other CEOs. And I was like, oh, this is so joy-filled, because then I get to pull from a tool belt. And an analogy I always like to use with people is Batman is one of the only superheroes who is not superhuman. But what makes Batman a superhero is his super tool belt. So that's one of my favorite things when I work with CEOs or teams or mentoring young people is what tools can you have in your super tool belt? So that way, when you find yourself falling off a metaphorical proverbial cliff, a friend disappoints you or betrays you, or your significant other cheats on you, What tool can you use to let go of that, taking it personally, to go back into your higher brain function, to quiet that amygdala of, I'm going to die, I'm not going to survive this. And so I even tell people, keep a little cheat sheet. You can even keep it on your phone, in the picture of your phone, of the top 3 things that will support you the most when you're going into meltdown mode. And it's just having those tools in your tool belt and having access to them when you need them is really what makes us superhuman.
I would add that Batman does have one superpower, that he never gives up.
That is true. That is true. Diligence and perseverance.
Which we can all
And an awesome tool belt,
Yes. And badass cars.
Yeah.
And tchotchkes, yes. And being a billionaire is
And
also
Alfred.
not too bad.
Oh, that
Alfred's the
doesn't
best.
hurt. All right, let's jump into the part B of our podcast, which is let's address some of the questions that have been asked. Or in this case, Anais, who is our one of our correspondent
field correspondent
host.
That sounds better.
Yeah, and so sometimes, she'll interview, and sometimes we'll get clips of the actual interview, and sometimes she grabs the sense of the entire conversation and says what wasn't spoken. Here's what came out of it.
That's the vibe.
She summarizes it.
The vibe.
Yeah. And so today we're gonna look at some of these because she's incredible. All right, so let's see what she has to say on this first one.
We are often asked to project ourselves into the future and kind of find an answer to where do you see yourself in so and so years. And some of us have a response to this question, and other people cannot see themselves in a couple of years. The question is, what's the balance between living in the present and looking into the future? Because sometimes it's best to live in the present, and other times it's best to set a goal for the future so that you can live in your present and work towards that goal. But sometimes it creates an imbalance. It makes us feel anxiety, and it could actually lead us to a burnout, for example. How do you find balance between staying in the present but also working towards your future?
Wow. That's a really great question. Do you want to tackle it first?
I'll give somebody else a chance first, and then I'll dive in.
Leon, tips?
All right. Sure, why not? So, and the more we talk about this too, which is a wonderful thing about doing this podcast, is your philosophy on things changes. But I wonder to what extent it's almost a false dichotomy. This balance, again, we balance comes up a lot as we talk to all these different people. And it is tough finding the right balance, But the more I think about it, I'm not sure there is balance, right? There's just there's kind of like, it's like, do I live in the future or do I live in the present? Well, you can only live in the present. There's only one place to live. Try living in the future. It's impossible, right?
Okay, Eckhart Tolle.
And so, and obviously you need a plan. You need a North Star. But coming back to some of what I touched on earlier, right? You can't control the future. So if you create a future version of you that is impossible to guarantee, and then stake your sense of self to a version of you that doesn't exist, a version of you have no control over its manifestation, and that a version, sort of like you said, right, with these friends that sometimes wander out of your life because that wasn't the right time, a version of you that you may not even actually enjoy being, right? It's a concept of a person that doesn't exist. And so I kind of lean on this thing that try to live in the future, and try to have a North Star, and try to be really open to what lands in front of you, and trust to some extent that with good mentorship and sort of community and connections around you, that it'll work out. It'll, and that can be really hard. Because effectively, with more words, I just told you, don't worry about it, which is sort of like, how do you tell someone with anxiety not to worry, right? Like, it's like saying, you have depression, just be happier, right? And so, unfortunately, life is a journey, and, people that have anxiety, there's no easy way out of that, right? You have to find the tools in your tool belt that work for you, and that's a process of going out there and trying that, and it is difficult, and I have a lot of sympathy for those people. But I would sort of say that in my mind, there's only living in the present. It's the only place you can exist. And so that would be my slight reframing of that piece.
Really cool.
I don't know that I have the answer to this question, but I do know that I can share the things that I do to try to be in the present moment. And one of the tools that I have is this new EMDR therapy through the phone, and it does this light therapy through my eyes. And it's the only thing that I've recognized will get me immediately into the present moment, but I always have to keep pulling myself back because then my brain will see things or go into the future, go into visions, and then it pulls me back to the present moment once I acknowledge that. So that's one tool that I use to try to be in the present moment. And another tool that I use is a planner called There's Plenty of Time. And that gives me peace that like, okay, I might not have done X, Y, or Z today, but there is plenty of time. It's like the abundant thinking and taking away limiting beliefs that you can do whatever you want to do as long as you remain focused on it and try to be balanced. But balance, I agree, it doesn't really exist because it's
again just my philosophy.
impossible. Yeah.
I'm not the thought police. You can obviously.
I don't know. I don't have the answer to that question. I just know some tools that I use to try to stay in the present moment.
Yeah. I think a lot of this, and just lived experience here, when you're 15, 16, 20, there is this box and expectations of getting A's and doing these things and it's almost like this pressure, like I've got to figure out what course I'm going to take. I got to figure out my career. I got to figure out these things out. It's like this, and this is part of the reason we're doing the podcast, right? Is that there's this unspoken pressure that society puts on young individuals. When in reality, the truth of the matter is that no one has control of the future. No one has control. You can set some goals, financial goals. You can set some career goals. But what we've explored in this series is that not one person that has come on as a guest has done what they said they were going to do, except for
Holly, who at 7 years old chose a career and stuck to it.
Good
Fair
for
play.
her.
Only person.
But everyone else, life happens, and it is this false sense. It's a facade when people think that they've got control of life, because you don't. It's life happens, and you have intention, and you can set some intention, and you've got to leave. I'm going to use the word grace again. You got to leave this grace there that says, I've got a North Star. Here's the general direction I want to go, but I've got enough sense that accepting of how I'm going to get there. So I don't necessarily know the direction. I just know that it's going to be okay. And that's now, being my age of 51, looking back, I'm able to say that. But at 20, it was completely different. So I understand it. And so I agree with you as far as less worry, and understand that the system puts a lot of pressure, and it's okay for both parents and kids to hear this, that it's okay to say, hey, put some goals out there, but don't put so much anxiety on yourself.
And well, one thing as well, right, that especially when you're younger, as you get older, it's easy to see that things do work out, and you go through thing after thing after thing, and it all kind of comes right in the end. But one of the things when you're younger is to remember you are part of someone else's plan. Your parent has, or parents or whatever, and have some plan of what it is they want you to do, whether consciously or not. And your school has a plan. It needs a certain number of kids to get A's and B's and C's, because that's how they get paid and funded. And the government has a plan for what you as an individual citizen to some extent are going to go do, not personally, and it layers all these pressures on. And actually it doesn't matter. I mean, like, it's important to have a plan, right? But like, look, it's going to change. Everyone's got a plan till you get punched in the face, right? Yeah. And so
Mike Tyson,
it's good. He's 100% right. I personally have a sort of a philosophy that I never have more than a 5-year plan, because it is my plan is that within those 5 years, at the end of those 5 years, I should be such a different person that I can't plan past 5 years, because me from 5 years from now would be like, oh, that was dumb. I definitely don't want to do that, right? And it's sort of this like always trying to just hoping to sort of be a different person in some respects and have different goals and motivations.
And with that, the question was balance. And I think the balance is, back what you said earlier, allowing grace for yourself and who you are and paying attention to who you're becoming, that's the more important question than what you're going to do in the future. Because as we've seen in this show, everybody's future is different than what they anticipated. So if we know that going in, that's a known. Just seek to understand self and then trust the path, trust the journey, and it'll be okay. And that's where that sense of peace and balance is. And I know it's hard to say, but part of that journey is going to be failure. So you almost have to put that goal out there and fail at it, because those failures are where the growth comes.
Agreed. And if I may piggyback on what everybody's been sharing, there are two things I'm being called to share. One is the idea of being committed but not attached. That's where our suffering occurs, is in the attachment.
Yeah.
So could you be 100% committed that you get your dream job, that you meet your soulmate, that you find your dream house and travel the world, whatever your hopes, dreams, and aspirations are? And could you simultaneously be surrendered and unattached to move forward directionally with that intention and surrendering it with every step forward? And two is something that I found to be very helpful that I love to do. Was every morning I set my intentions, both ontologically in terms of who I want to be. So like when I was facilitating a mastermind before this or being here with you, I might set an intention to be thoughtful, to be present, to be authentic, whatever it is. So that's the ontological, the being side of it. And then I might set intentions for, like, I've been on 10 planes in the last 2 weeks, to have easy and effortless plane rides. So every day I'm setting my intentions. Every week I look at my week on a Sunday and I'm just present to who I get to meet and be with. And I ask myself, how would I love this week to go? And so I'll write it down in the notes section of my phone. I do it weekly, I do it monthly, I do it daily, and I do it annually. And at the same time, the moment I've written my intention, I've surrendered it and let it go to whatever. I always say, another one of my favorite mantras is, universe, please know I'm going to make plans with the highest and best of intentions. However, if for any reason these plans are not in my highest and best good, or that of humanity, please lovingly, easily, and effortlessly redirect me to the right place, the right time, and the right people.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That is what you just said. I've heard this before. Becky said to me, as far as and I was trying to articulate that when you set the goal, don't be attached to it, right? It's great to have it. It's your North Star, but understand that life's going to do this and be okay and have that flexibility. So completely agree with that. All right. Next one.
As an artist, for example, or anybody in any field, how do you manage to find your artistry? Meaning, each one of us is unique and we have unique ways to communicate and convey our art or whatever business you're into. And it takes a lot of effort to find that unique aspect of who you are. And it takes a long time also to manage to communicate it to others in a way that they can understand. The question is, how do you find that? And once that you manage to actually identify it, how do you communicate it? Are there some steps to follow? Is there a routine? Is there a way? What's the secret?
Are you an artist?
I didn't know I was an artist until about 3 or 4 years ago when I started doing plant medicine.
Okay.
And as soon as I did my first psilocybin journey in 2021, all of a sudden everything became art. I began dancing every day. I began painting every week and writing poetry. And so I think we all have an artist within us that can be expressed in many ways. We could express it through preparing food for a loved one or for ourselves, or drawing or painting. And I think self-expression is the most important thing. I think that the more we give voice to that still, soft, quiet inner voice of our soul, that's art, however that emerges.
Love that answer. I was going to say, back when I was 18, was pretty good at drawing, and then for whatever reason, it wasn't calling going forward. And that's transformed for me as a hobby. I love to cook. And so, we've done some barbecuing together.
That was some good brisket, ladies and gentlemen. Let me tell you, I actually overcooked mine. It was dry. I was very sad.
But it was the love and work that went into that goes into those projects. And really, at the end of the day,
when did you show? You were like at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. or something like dumb. He was sat outside my house for like 2 hours before my son even woke up. Who wakes up at 6, by the way, so that he could cook this brisket.
I wasn't just sitting. I had the smoker going. All this.
Yeah, right. You weren't just there staring blankly forward.
You made me sound like
twiddling your thumb.
No.
Sitting outside the house
He
while the
brought
baby's
some
asleep.
coolers. He had a
Looking in the window. Are you
chair.
ready to come out? Are you ready to come out? Smoker, let's smoke. Let's smoke.
It was a one-man tailgate. That's what Dan was up to.
But the art, like I discovered over time that I enjoy that process. And the longer the process, the more you put into the menu or the art or whatever. It is this art, and it comes out, and then when you see the smiles on faces, and so that was the art expression. But I want to point to you because art is your life.
Art is my life. I discovered at a very young age. Life is they're not mutually exclusive. But I remember the moment I wanted to become an actor, and that was, I was 6 years old, laying on Ellis Island on the ground, and my Aunt Marcia was teaching me about the immigrants that came through from Ellis Island, and she encouraged me, let's act out being immigrants who've just come to Ellis Island, and we did. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love being other people. But as I've grown older and I've nurtured my craft and so on and so forth, it's not like self-indulgent like it could be for some people. It's more to give back to others and to heal through humor, because humor and comedy has always brought me out of dark places. So, and I'm still discovering it through, like, what am I good at? How can I best portray this to others? But one of the things I'm really learning now is to tap into my business side and my admin side, because both are there, but I can be a little lofty and I can be living outside of my head and dreaming, but I am trying to come back to my center and my core, which also has a gift of business and getting things done and so on and so forth. But I love what you said about self-expression, because you can self-express yourself through art or through your everyday work, even through emails.
Yeah.
All right. Last question.
How do you deal with that feeling you have when you're stuck in a situation and it creates anxiety? So, for example, you're stuck in a job you don't like, or in a I just said it. That you're stuck into a course that you don't like, or a field of study that you don't like. How do you deal with that anxiety? But most of all, are there any shortcuts to get out of that situation? What are the mental exercises that you can do to understand are you stuck, or are you just struggling with something that is hard, that is going to make you grow? It's very hard to understand the difference between the two.
Weighty question.
I love it.
Reach into your tool belt.
I already have.
Bring out
I'm
some
trying to-
tools.
I was trying to choose my top two. Tool number one, that is my go-to. I teach to myself every day. I teach to different people. Is heart-focused breathing by HeartMath. Are you guys familiar with it?
Familiar with heart math, but please share.
It's very simple. It's been being studied for 40 years scientifically. And what they found is when we put our bodies into a state of what's called coherence, it's a physiological state where we quiet the amygdala and re-access our prefrontal cortex through slow, deep, heart-focused breathing. You basically, if you're in a situation, this is not to solve the problem of not being in the right job, which I can get into that next, or not being in the right relationship. But step one is to get out of your head and back into being able to hear your higher self. Because most of us don't realize this. We have what's called the 3-brain system. We have the amygdala, which I've mentioned is the reptilian brain. Am I safe? I'm not going to survive this, fight or flight. You have the midbrain. Are you like me? Can I trust you? And you have the highest brain, the executive functioning, creative thinking, being an artist, self-expression. But the higher brains can't function until the lower brain first feels safe. So I love teaching people to do slow, deep, heart-focused breaths into the count of 5 and out to the count of 5, as though your heart itself is doing the breathing. When I get triggered in business, it has been so powerful, where it has stopped me from having meltdowns and blowing up and sending those nasty emails I used to send years ago. So heart-focused breathing is great for anxiety in the moment, in an anxious conversation, situation, work, etc. Allows you to, again, drop into a state of coherence, and then you can actually put others in a state of coherence, which is a longer conversation. When it comes to knowing if something is right for you, there's two parts to it. Part number one is understanding that doing the thing that's hardest for us is access to miracles.
Mm-hmm.
I actually just finished my first ever year-long mastermind on miracle making. And one of my favorite ways to teach people to access miracles, in addition to writing down the miracles we already experience every day, the small and the large, is to try and do something that challenges you. It's doing the thing that's really hard. I'll give your listeners a great example. I often once a month will turn off my cell phone all day on a Saturday. I'll do complete digital detox. Sometimes I'll do no talking as well, where I'll spend 8 hours in complete silence plus no cell phone. I don't do that every time, but I do turn off my phone. And in doing something that's hard for us, whether it's a hard relationship, etc., then we all of a sudden get access to greater miracles. Now, the flip side of that is, when do you know that it's the right time to go? When I was considering going through the divorce, one of my teachers said the most beautiful thing to me. He said, again, going back to mentors, David Guillaume said, Jen, if you're going to get a divorce, do it from a place of love, not fear. Any choice we make, if we're leaving a friendship, if we're leaving a job, if we're leaving a class that we don't like, and we're doing it out of fear, it's not the right time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
However, if we can do it from a place of love for yourself, love and appreciation for whatever it is, and that was what one of the catalysts was for allowing me to leave my marriage and, wish him well and not do it from any anger or fear.
Very cool. I agree 100%. Any other comments?
Based on what you said about miracles, every single day for the past 3 weeks, I have been told, read A Course in Miracles, not reread A Course in Miracles, not read A Course in Miracles, every shower moment,
You think the universe is saying something?
I think I need to read A Course in Miracles. Thank you for confirming it for the 18th time.
Yes,
Well,
the universe
it takes some of us 2 or 3. 18 is a good number
hard to be
too.
told what to do, right?
That's quite a lot of, normally, me and Dan have talked about this. I have a rule that if the universe tells me to do something 3 times in a row, I do it.
Yeah,
right?
same.
But 18?
I'm so busy.
Love it.
Really cool. I love how you described that. I've often said this. There are going to be things that, and we've talked about, there's certain things that are helping you grow and that you need to get through them and to be able to identify them. And I think it is the recentering to make sure that that's what is this thing that I need to do? Is it essential for where I'm going? I often have told my daughter and others that I see life as a game of levels, so that I'm imagining Donkey Kong. And Donkey Kong has these things that come at you. And until you master level 1,
Yes.
you're not getting a level 2. It's just, you have to keep you're going to stay on that level, and you got it. And if you run away, those barrels that are rolling toward you, if you run away, it's still going to get you, and you're not going to get any further. So, at one point in my life, I started running towards the barrels. Like if I see something coming and I've got to deal with it, I know that there's a lesson here that I've got to overcome as quickly as possible to get to the other side of this. And so I would say when I'm currently faced with things that are challenging, I'm like, all right, I have to deal with this. It's whatever it is. I've got to deal with it, focus, knock it out, and move on. So it's almost like, get behind me, let's go. And
may I just shift one thing you said?
Sure. Uh-huh.
What if you shifted I have to I have the opportunity to? Because that's one of the ways one of my teachers taught me years ago, is that we should all over ourselves.
Yeah.
I should do this. I have to do that.
Yeah.
And the moment we do that with what Natalie was just saying, then we have resistance to it. That's another tool. Is like, could we drop the resistance? Where it's like, if I see the barrels coming, I choose to run towards it.
Right.
I have the opportunity to play with the barrels and dance with them. Though I think the language we use informs the way that we interact with the problem or the opportunity.
Thank you. Very, very insightful. Like sometimes I'll say it and it comes out, but yes, I see them as opportunities.
Yeah.
I see them as the goal. And you said this earlier, is on the other side of that.
Exactly.
So it is, I don't see him as it's a hard thing, but I don't see him, it's like, it is a necessary thing to get to the reward on the other side. Digging for any treasure is not going to be easy. You've got to, or it's not going to seem easy. You got to get on the other side of something. So
may I just say something really quick about that?
100%.
Earning things is so important. I had the privilege and honor of building 2 schools, one in Nepal and one in Senegal in the last 6 years. And one of the things that I noticed is the kids in Nepal, when I met them, no running water, no meat, no electricity, nothing. It's like you're out in the middle of nowhere farming from sun till dusk. And the kids didn't even have access to school. But what I noticed that shocked me is those kids were 10 times happier than any first world kid, than my nephews, than anybody else I've ever seen. And the idea behind that is that if you give us the opportunity to earn something, to jump over those barrels, to confront our own adversary, which is ourselves, really, then that's where we feel joy. It's like if I give you $1 million or $1 billion, you're going to lose it tomorrow. But if I give you the opportunity to earn $1 million, you're going to appreciate it, relish it, and cherish it differently than if I had just given it to you.
I love that you put money towards that, because there is do you guys know the average hold time of wealth if it's won either by lottery or inheritance?
5 years.
Guess?
I don't 11 months. I don't know.
Closest, 18 months.
Wow.
No matter what you've won through lottery or inheritance, 18 months. If it's not earned, because you're just not at the level. You've been fast, and think about this. You've been fast forward from this game to that game with none of the lessons along the way.
Right.
And so you start, and that's why you hear some of these actors that do really, really well, and then football players and all that, and then they just have lost it all because they just were given all this wealth with no earning.
Yeah, and you don't have the capacity to hold it. I study many spiritual disciplines, including Kabbalah, and the Kabbalists say it's our vessel. David Guillaume will often say, imagine that you have 1,000 watts of light, but you only have a 100-watt light bulb. It's going to create a short circuit. So it's like, what can your vessel hold? One of my other mantras I say is, universe, please give me the strength and certainty to pass any tests that come before me, and help me expand my vessel 1,000 times its size to contain a vast wealth and do the greater good I'm meant to do with the world.
I feel like everybody's real. As soon as you finish the line, I'm like, oh, I'm a host. I'm supposed to say something to them.
Nancy, just end the episode. Just cut the episode.
Exactly. We're
done. It's like, well, hard.
What do I say after
follow
that?
that with an outro.
Sorry, guys.
That was beautiful. Thank you.
Really great. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, guys.
I think it was such a lovely,
Really
refreshing, powerful way to look at life, and I think it's a message that needs to be received. So
Thank you.
thank you so much for being on the show, and we will now off to lunch. Barbecue.
That's a wrap on today's episode of Uncharted Your Sidekick for Life. A heartfelt thank you to Jennifer Hill for sharing her wisdom, spirit, and powerful story with us. From her insights on leadership and growth to her journey of self-discovery, we learned a lot about how we can better navigate life's challenges while being good to ourselves and others. We hope you feel inspired to embrace your own path with grace and courage, no matter how uncharted it may seem. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review if you enjoyed today's episode. And until next time, keep pushing forward, stay curious, and don't be afraid to explore the uncharted.